So I'm really excited about this upcoming series called A New Normal because it's very timely to what's going on right now. We now have this phrase introduced into our midst that seems to be the new buzzword as the world slowly begins to awaken from its COVID hibernation. And that phrase is a new normal. You can hardly watch TV or listen to the radio for more than a few moments before you hear that phrase being said. It's a phrase that captures a couple of things. First, a desire that we have for things to return to the way they were, but also a realization that we have that we can't get back to the way things were, at least not right now. It's an expression inviting us to embrace the comforting things of the past while striving for creative ways of being in the future. A new normal. And as such, that can mean many things. From restaurants being only 50% open when that happens, to plexiglass at every counter of every store, to meeting everyone from our boss to our grandkids via Zoom or FaceTime. It also reflects something that I don't think that we quite grasped when this pandemic first hit our shores, and that's how much life would change. I remember when we closed our church back on March the 16th. I fully expected that we would be open again for Palm Sunday, which was April the 5th. Never did I guess in those first few days that it would be months before we could open our doors again. And even in the first few weeks when everyone was focused on staying secure and physically healthy, sheltering in place, we gave scarce attention to what might be the long-term effects of this tiny little virus. It was only after the immediacy of the crisis passed or began to ease, that our eyes were opened to the fact that normal is not a place that we're going to return to anytime soon. And it's taken a bit of a toll on all of us, hasn't it? From all ages. To our kids who face a long summer without the usual distractions of summer camp or theme parks, to workers who face the reality of returning to a workplace not sure what that's going to mean, to those who are retired desperately missing family connections and social groups that are the lifeblood to stave off loneliness. If you watch my Facebook post on Wednesday, I spoke about something called the re-entry crash. This is what psychologists are calling the psychological effect of this stage of the pandemic. They say that many people are feeling more stressed out now than they did when the height of this pandemic hit back in March and April. There's many reasons for that. But I think one of them is that we human beings tend to deal better with what we know than what we don't know. In March and April, we knew what we were facing. We knew what we had to do to stay safe. But now as we begin to emerge, we don't necessarily know what we're facing or how to adjust. And that causes an entirely different stress reaction. So I thought for the next 5 weeks I would tackle this topic of the new normal by looking at some ancient biblical characters who were forced to face their own unique new situation. People who, like us, suddenly found their world turned upside down. But rather than panic, shut down, or crawl into a hole, they responded with creativity and courage and calm resolve. Maybe in their stories we can find a little inspiration, a little encouragement, some wisdom, and definitely a dash or two of humor. So if you're ready to go, what better place to start than that very ancient story of a global crisis, one that started with a day of rain and ended with a new normal we could hardly imagine. You know the story of Noah's Ark. Even if you haven't gone to church, you probably know the story of Noah's Ark. It's one of those ancient stories we've taken from the pages of the Bible and applied it to our modern popular culture. Just in case you're watching and you're not sure what Noah's Ark is about, it simply goes like this. According to the Bible, in the ancient days of civilization, God was upset with the people of the earth and decided to start fresh. God was going to wash the earth clean and begin again, with one exception, a man named Noah and his family. God said to Noah, I'm going to spare you, but you have work to do. Build an ark, a giant floating boat, for you and your family and then gather up 2 creatures from all over the planet, 2 of each kind. Fill your boat with your wife and kids and everything from elephants to chipmunks to chimpanzees. And when the time comes and the flood subsides, you will be able to repopulate the earth. And Noah, despite what I'm sure was the mocking of all of his friends, built the ark. And the clouds gathered. The weather forecasts had predicted that this was going to be a mighty storm. Prepare for the worst. On the other hand, I imagine the ancient version of Donald Trump probably touted it as just a shower. It's going to go away in a moment. Everyone got out their umbrellas and hunkered down, and it started, and it continued, and it didn't stop. It didn't stop for 40 days and 40 nights. Torrents of rain, a wall of rain. And while all of humanity went to, quote, make their beds with the fishes, as the mafia might say, Noah and his gang, ensconced in their floating zoo, drifted along like rubber duckies in a bathtub until eventually the rain stopped. The water subsided, the rainbow came out, and they went forth to repopulate the earth. And Noah went on to become the richest man in the world. Do you know why he was the richest man in the world? Because he wisely floated his stock while the world went into liquidation. I so need an audience to laugh at this stuff. Anyway, it's a great story. There's lots going on in that story. But strip it right down, and it really is just a story of someone who was forced to adapt to a new normal. The world suddenly changed very quickly. So, you may be wondering where I'm going with this story. Well, before I tell you that, let me tell you where I'm not going with this story. I'm not going to suggest that COVID-19 is the new flood sent by God to cleanse the earth and start again. Anything that targets the most fragile and vulnerable among us is not from any God that I wish to believe in. Secondly, I'm not going to suggest that there's some kind of historical precedent set by Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark, at least in my opinion, is a story. It's an ancient myth from ancient tribal people striving to make sense of forces that they could not understand. Now, while there is some archaeological evidence to suggest that floods did overwhelm parts of the earth eons ago, boiling it down to a man in a boat with a floating zoo is not sound science. But for the people of the day, it was a powerful story to make sense of global forces they could not understand or control. So I'm not going there. Before I tell you again where I am going, it should be noted that from a public health standpoint, there's also a really good lesson in Noah's Ark. Have you asked yourself this? Why did Noah survive when no one else did? Because he listened to the advice of a higher authority who knew more about it than he did. While everyone else said, it's just a shower, it will pass, Noah listened to those who knew better, in this case, God, and followed that advice. That's a great lesson. When the world changes, listen to those who know something about it. Listen to what they're telling us. You've heard it from everyone else, so please hear it from me too. Please listen to what science is telling us, what scientists are telling us, what disease specialists are telling us, what public health doctors are telling us. I know we like to think that we are smart, but we are not smarter than them. And it is not good time to play chicken with the big brains of this world. Wash your hands. Stay apart. Don't go to Bellwood Trinity Park in Toronto. Sacrifice a little bit of your freedom for the good of everyone. Listen to the scientists and learn from history. I know COVID-19 is a new bug that we've never experienced. But in terms of surviving pandemics, this is not our first rodeo. Science and history have taught us that the severity of pandemics are in direct proportion to following or not following public health guidelines. If you want proof of that, look 100 years ago to the Spanish flu. For example, look at the difference between Philadelphia and St. Louis. In the fall of 1918, as a second wave of the flu started to spread, Philadelphia, despite warnings from public health officials, held a parade to mark the end of World War I. St. Louis, on the other hand, chose to listen to their public health advisors, and they canceled their parade. What happened? Philadelphia got nailed with the second wave, absolutely nailed. Whereas St. Louis flattened the curve. They had less than half the casualties per capita of Philadelphia. Whether you are Noah listening to God, or an American listening to Dr. Fauci, or a Canadian listening to Dr. Tam, please listen. We know these folks don't get it right all the time. Well, I assume God probably does. But their knowledge base far surpasses pretty much anyone else on the planet. They do have the expertise, and they do have the knowledge to guide us through these times. All right, back to Noah. Let's have a little fun with this. I was thinking about the story and what allowed Noah to get through this crisis, this new normal that he was facing. So let me make this simple. Think of the letter A. It's the first word of ark. Ark has 3 letters. There are 3 A words that Noah embraced to deal with his new normal. Number 1, he adjusted his thinking. The world is going to change, said God, and you need to be ready. You need to get into a new way of thinking. There's no way that Noah would have built his ark without first adjusting his thoughts. In other words, letting go of old ideas and assumptions and making space for new ones. I think one of the things that's getting some of us in trouble in this pandemic is that some people are approaching the new normal with the same thoughts or patterns as the old normal. They refuse to think in a new way and instead spend a lot of time mired in regret because it can't be the old way, at least not for now. I spoke with someone this week who, after I asked her how she was feeling, she said, I'm really angry. She said, at first I was worried and scared, and now I'm just angry. I'm angry that we have to go through this. I'm angry that my kids have to go through this, that they don't get their summer. And she has a right to be angry. You know what? I'm pretty angry too. But being angry at something that we can't change really only ends up hurting ourselves. Adjustment thinking invites us or encourages us to replace anger with creativity, finding new ways to embrace life in ways that maybe we didn't before. For example, someone else told me this week that they'd always wanted to write their memoirs for their kids and their grandkids, all about their life. Finally, he said, I have time to do that, and that's what I'm doing. That is adjustment thinking. I used this illustration in a talk I gave a few weeks ago, but another perfect example is Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was a great inventor. And one day, fire ravaged his laboratory, destroying everything, including all the plans he had for upcoming inventions. When asked if he was upset, he said, yes, but I'm not defeated. He said, the fire destroyed all my plans. It also destroyed all my mistakes. He said, now I have the ability to think of things in a fresh new way. And months later, he invented the phonograph. That's adjustment thinking. New ways of thinking to reflect a new normal. So, Noah adjusted his thinking, and secondly, he adapted his actions. Noah was successful because he adapted to his situation. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. When life gives you a flood, build an ark. Charles Darwin, the famous evolutionist who wrote extensively about the origins of life, has been quoted often during this pandemic, and not, I believe, in a particularly constructive way. And by the way, just as an aside, Darwin did not come up with the phrase, the survival of the fittest. That was coined by a sociologist named Herbert Spencer. Now, Darwin would quote Spencer, but it wasn't his phrase. This is actually what Charles Darwin wrote. It is not the strongest or most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change. If you want to throw a Darwin quote around in this pandemic, that's a much more productive one than simply proclaiming survival of the fittest and then feeling smug because you believe that you're among the fittest. It's not the strongest and most intelligent who will survive. It's those who can best manage change. Part of the gift of evolution is recognizing that human species have an amazing ability to adapt and readapt to their reality. And we see it all around us right now. Think of how much has changed in just over 2 months. Like I said before, there's plexiglass everywhere. There's spots on the floor telling us where we should stand. Plans and protocols are in place so that things can open safely. And it all can be rather intimidating, but there's another side to it. Isn't it amazing how in a short period of time we have come together as a human species to find ways to protect ourselves and to care for each other? I think that we've adapted remarkably well as a society to this new normal. We are building some pretty impressive arcs to keep us above the waves. But how are you doing? How are you adapting to the new normal? It's a challenge. It really is. But as Darwin said, it is necessary for survival. You know, almost all of my weddings have been canceled for this summer and this fall. But I did have an email from a couple for a wedding that I was scheduled to do. The guy in the couple I've known since he was 5 years old. He went to my very first church, and now he's getting married, and he contacted me about a year ago to ask if I'd officiate at the wedding, which I was honored to do. And they had a big wedding planned at a golf course. Dozens of people were going to be there. And then this hit. And he thought that they would cancel their wedding, or they thought they would cancel their wedding. But then they decided that they would adapt. And instead, they're having their wedding at Camp Sempreska, which is a United Church camp. Why Camp Sempreska? Because that's where they met when they were 14 years old, and they were both counselors there. So it's just going to be the two of them, myself, and a few family members, and I'm sure it's going to be very meaningful and very romantic. That's an example of adapting to meet a new normal. But there are so many others. When the rain comes, you can get angry or you can get busy. Noah got busy, and he adapted to his new normal. So Noah adjusted his thinking, he adapted his actions, and finally, he accepted his situation. Rain stopped, flood receded, boat settled on the ground, door opened. Noah, his family, and hundreds of probably pretty stressed out animals stepped back into the world. But the world wasn't the same as it was 40 days ago. Everything was different. It was a new normal. And God said, "Go and reproduce." And the two rabbits said, "What do you think we've been doing in here for the last 40 days? I couldn't resist. Imagine if Noah and his family had said, "Forget this new normal. We're going back to the old normal." And they'd gone and they'd sheltered in the ark and prayed for a miracle. Well, that would have been it for the future of humanity. Instead, they accepted what fate had brought them, decided to thrive in this new world, led, of course, by the rainbow, or God's promise to be with them. You know, as many people know, the final stage of a grief process is acceptance. Acceptance of a new reality. And it's often a very long journey to get there, as anyone who's lost someone can easily tell you. And in terms of this situation, I know many people are not there yet. Like my friend who described herself as very angry. And I respect that and I understand that. I don't think that I'm there yet either. Grief, and this is a grief reaction, must be allowed to take its course, free from guilt or pressure or expectations. We only get to acceptance when we are ready to get to acceptance. But if I could just share one thought that leaps out at me from this story. When the flood began, God's conversation with Noah was in the context of survival. Rain is coming. Build an ark. Gather everyone in. Hurry, hurry. The storm's brewing. Survive. But then when the flood subsided and the doors opened to a new normal, God's message to Noah switched from one of survive to one of thrive. He said, go forth and multiply. At some point, I believe that is a shift that we all have to take. For a long time now, the question we have asked ourselves is, how do I survive? But now as a new normal takes hold, perhaps the question becomes, what must I do to thrive? Safely, of course, but to start once again to find my feet in this world that has shifted. And without sounding corny, a big part of this is making the decision to seek out a rainbow. That promise that there's goodness and joy and love even in this new normal. I'm going to admit something to you. Earlier in this week, I was feeling a little down. Maybe feeling a little of that re-entry crash. Longing for the old days, pre-March. Wondering when this bad dream might be over. It was a tough place to be in for a couple of days, and you probably know what I'm talking about. And then on Wednesday, we were in the back parking lot giving out seeds for our fundraiser. And one after another, people from Northwest drove in. And just seeing their smiling faces and hear how they were doing and sharing a few laughs, it was like a vaccine for my spirit. It was a rainbow, a reminder that it may be a new normal, but some things haven't changed. The love, friendship, care, and understanding that we share together. The strength that holds us together and the strength that holds us up. And I knew once again, without a shadow of doubt, that we will get through this. Not only will we survive, we will thrive, and the future will be okay. We just need to hang in there, and we need to hang on to each other. And the rains will stop, and the ark will settle, and the doors will open, and the sun will shine, and a voice will be heard urging us to go forth and find our place again, not just to survive in our new normal, but to thrive in the midst of it. The 3 A's of Noah's Ark: adjust, adapt, and finally accept. And now you know the way forward. Amen.